I'm very glad to have a special guest here tonight, someone who's not unfamiliar to 106th Street and to the Red Oak. This is the Red Oak Older Adult Center and the Red Oak Residence. It was the second building of the West Side Federation for Senior and Supportive Housing, the first one being the Marseille. There are about 31 now, okay, a good number of them in Manhattan Valley and the West Side. But the person who was spearheaded everything, and I was fortunate to get to know and to work with over the years, was the Reverend Laura Jervis. Okay, and she was here, and she's here. Okay, and those who know what she's done, it's amazing. But even beyond the West Side Federation and the development of it, and all the buildings, including 108th, getting 108th Street going, the Marseille, the Cowell House, the Fania Gershom House, the Leah and Kurt Schneider building. Those are the ones just in the area around, but way more, and other things as a minister, doing great work that way. But her mission for so many years was housing, but she's not here in that role. She's here as a person who was a board member of Acorn. And everyone knows the name Acorn, and we're not talking about those little things that fall from oak trees. So I'd like to call Reverend Laura Jervis to address you right now.
Thank you, Shelley. It's good to be here. Good evening, everyone. So I understand that there's been a little confusion about Acorn and the building at 23 West 106th Street. First of all, let me say that I'm a board member of the Acorn Center. As people in the community, you know that Acorn was a psychiatric residential facility for adolescents. I've been the Acorn started at 23 in 1991, and it closed in 2020. It closed because the Department of Health decided that they wanted to do something different than these kinds of residential facilities. And frankly, I think it was because it was very expensive to do this kind of program. What I want to say is that so when the Department of Mental Health said no more of this kind of residential facility, then Acorn went about selling the building. The building was sold about a little bit over a year ago. It was sold to a limited liability corporation company, and around that was a really a real estate organization. And so the August Acorn program and the August Acorn building is no longer Acorn. The confusion was that perhaps Acorn was trying to put in folks into that building. We have nothing to do with the building of the August Acorn Center. And I'm happy to answer any questions, but that's the story. Hi.
I'm Elizabeth Kellner. I live a half a block from the Acorn Center. I have followed the litigation over the sale of the building over these many, many months, including the original proposed sale that Acorn would keep the $14 million of the sale price for its own research purposes, and that the New York State Attorney General's office said No way. You were founded as an organization to provide program and services. I'm sorry to have to do this, but I do feel that the record needs to be clear about how Icorn ended up in the position of needing to sell this building and placing us in the position. So you lost your license because the board was unwilling to make the changes that the New York State Department of Health wanted, and because you were unwilling to develop a succession plan for the founding executive director. I have cast no aspersions on the board or the executive director, but I just want people to know that basically you lost your license, you were discredited for a number of regulatory non-compliance issues, and that's how you ended up
Okay,
needing to sell this building.
okay, that's
That's
it.
all I want to say.
Thank you.
We-
So let me just also add to that is that the so-called $14 million went both to the Attorney General's office, but more importantly, to Montefiore Hospital, which has a very active adolescent program. And that's where most of the money went.
Okay, we'll have one more question if there is one.
Out of curiosity, this buyer that was wrapped around a real estate interest, did it, as a seller, you need, have special interest, you have interest in selling your property. Was it clear what was going to be happening? Okay, got it. And the next question might be for the board about who might be providing the social services, because we understand that can make a
Okay,
big.
we're going to have all that information for you. So Laura, thank you so much. Appreciate your being here. And as usual, transparent and clear and honest and devoted to so many good things. Now we're going, the purpose of the evening is to have an informational session on a proposed women's shelter for 23 West 106th Street. The organization in the city that oversees this and supervises it is the Department of Social Services. And we're very fortunate to have with us Marcia Horn, who's the Manhattan Director of the Department of Social Service. So I'd like to introduce Marcia.
Thank you so much, Shelley. Good evening, everyone. Pleasure being here. Thank you all for inviting us and Max for his diligent work and support here. So I do want to introduce the provider that's going to be providing services at this site. In addition, we do have our staff here and virtually. So to answer your questions, I'm gonna now introduce Stephen.
Hi, everybody. My name is Steve Mott. I am the Chief Strategy Officer for Help USA. Help USA is the shelter provider that is being contracted to run the shelter on 106th Street. I am happy to answer any questions you have. I can talk a little bit about the organization. I can talk a little bit about what we know about the shelter at this point. I will say that, like everything we do, these things are in constant flux until they're open. So I will do my best to answer questions based upon what we know right now, and let you know if there are things that we don't know. I'd also like to introduce Aisha Moore. Aisha Moore is our Associate Vice President of Single Adult Programs, and so she's the one that will be overseeing this at the top level. So hopefully we have answers to a lot of the questions that you guys have. If we don't, I promise to go back and find the answers as best I can. I will give you my email address. You can get in touch with me directly. I'm going to give that to you right now, just in case if anyone has a pen or if you want to come up to me afterwards. It's SMOTT. So my first initial, my last name, at helpusa.org. So I don't know if you want me to.
Okay, I think if you just give some basic information that, because not everybody knows even the basic information.
Happy to do that. Happy to do that. So Help USA, the organization I've worked for the last 12 years, is one of the largest homeless service providers in New York City. We've been around for about 40 years, and we do three big things. We run prevention programs and non-residential homeless programs. So those are what you would think of just in the home base kind of area. And those programs work to keep people in housing when they're housing unstable. We also run shelters. So that's what we're here to talk about. We run both shelters for single adult men, single adult women. We run shelters for families, and all of those look slightly different from one another. So tonight what we'll be talking about is a single adult woman shelter. And the last thing we do is develop and manage permanent supportive housing. We do that across the country, but most of our homelessness work exists here in New York City. To give you a sense of how big we are, we run about 61, 62 programs. We have 1,400 people that work for us, both here and across the country. And we serve about 25,000 clients in a given year. So we're big. I think we're fairly stable. I think we're really good at what we do. I wouldn't be here for 12 years if I didn't think we were good at what we do. And I'm really happy to have the opportunity to talk to you a little bit about this shelter. To give you just some broad background, this shelter is an important one for us because we used to run a shelter on 107th Street. And that was a shelter that was one of the shelters that we were most proud of in our portfolio. And we were proud of it for a number of reasons. One, we thought we did really good work there. We had really good outcomes there. The people that we served went on to do good things with their lives. And most importantly, we felt like we had community support there. So I see some people here from the 107th Street Block Association. And that was a shelter that we really felt responded to the needs of the community, and that the community really rallied behind the people we were trying to help. It was, of all the shelters we run in New York, and I think we run 18 or 19 shelters now, that was the one that we felt the most connected to the community at. When we were forced to close that shelter, we immediately started looking for another shelter in the neighborhood because we felt that this was a great place for us to serve this population. And we felt that we had a really good relationship with the neighborhood, and that the neighborhood really supported the idea that this population deserved a chance. And the neighborhood supported the idea that people could experience homelessness and still go on to do great things in their lives. And so after a significant amount of real estate wrangling at another site on 107th Street, we were offered this site on 106th Street. And then we began the process of figuring out how it would work, what the population would be, how many beds it would have, and what the programs would look like. And that is a very long process that we take very seriously. We have a team full of people who develop floor plans, who look at staffing plans, who understand security and safety, who know how to run these shelters. And they take us a long time to stand up because we are always reluctant to go into a space without understanding all the things that it'll take to make it a successful shelter. So that's what we've been doing for the past period of time. What I'm going to do now is just give you a sense of what this shelter will look like. I think that's probably a lot of you have questions about that. And then when it comes to talking about specific operations, what happens on the ground, I'm going to defer to Aisha because she's just the world's foremost expert on these things. So to give you a sense, estimated right now, the estimated opening for this shelter is November. I don't know a time when we've ever opened on the estimated opening date, but I will tell you that November is the estimated opening date. It is a 5-story building, totally rehabbed on the inside and out. We're looking at about 136 beds. So that's 136 people at the maximum capacity. Our shelters fluctuate in the number of people that are actually in them based upon the needs of the city. Right now, it is a single adult women population and what we call enhanced counseling services overlaid. So what that means is that in addition to the standard protocols staffing pattern that we have at our single adult shelters, we are also bringing in 2 experienced counselors to do work there. And that was something that we fought hard for and we really believe is going to make a difference with the population that we serve. So I can get into the staffing pattern. I can get into how it works. It is not dissimilar to any other single adult women's shelter in the system. There's nothing different about it, except that we think it's going to be good because we run it. So I'm happy to open to questions. I don't know, Aisha, is there anything that you wanted to add? A lot of what I'm going to talk about tonight is going to be both what we do, but also the way that the system works. I have found that because of the complex nature of the homeless system in New York, a lot of times people don't have a really good sense from the outside how people enter the system, what it means to be in the system, what the exits look like. And so as we go along, I'll try to talk a little bit about that to give people a sense of what it's like to be in the homeless system and what it's like for these individual clients that we serve. So Shelley, I'll turn it back over to you.
Okay, so we're going to begin with just one question from a committee member, and then we're going to go through the people who've signed up in order.
Hello. I have a question. Why would a private equity firm, Liberty Search Ventures, buy this building and turn it over to a group, no matter how wonderful, to provide services? It just, the sale was $14 million. Why would they buy this building? What's the matter? They couldn't hear me? Oh, okay. I'll just say it one more time. I'm sorry. I said, why would a private equity firm, Liberty Search Ventures, pay $14 million for this building and turn most of it over to another party, perhaps or probably unwillingly? But why would this firm, which is money-making, turn this over to your group, no matter how wonderful you are? I just find that very odd.
I can't speak for Liberty. I'm not Liberty. They're a for-profit private owner of buildings. What I can say is that they get a rental payment from the city. And so the way that the city contracts work is that a portion of the payment that we get goes to the social services and a portion goes to the landlord that owns the building. So my assumption is that they have figured out a way that this pencils out financially for them, but I'm not in their books, so I don't know.
Okay, we're going to take things in order. So our first question from the community will be from
Elizabeth Kellner.
Elizabeth Kellner. So come up.
2 minutes. Okay. My name is Elizabeth Kellner. I live a half a block from the building. I've lived in the neighborhood for 46 years. And ever since I found out that Acorn was putting the building up for sale in December 2021, I have been following the site diligently, emailing elected officials, staying in touch with Community Board 7. So to say that just recently was first official notice that the city plans to open a shelter here is not believable to me, not saying anyone's misrepresenting, but Liberty One's acquisition only business model has been to buy up distressed properties and lease them back to the city for operation as shelters. I'm not saying I don't want a shelter. I welcome a shelter. I just want us to understand the economic realities of this situation and how a for-profit real estate private equity firm ends up owning a building in our neighborhood, which was given to Acorn for $2 back in 1989. And there was no deed restriction that when Acorn transferred the property, they had to give it back to the city. So that's the economics of the situation. And the first contract of sale with Liberty One, who we know what their business model, was signed with Acorn in the spring of 2022. Believe me, Acorn would not have entered into that contract for $14 million without knowing something was going on with the city in terms of their ability to turn this into the shelter. So my question is, why has it been 2 years since the spring of 2022 when this ball got rolling that we, the community, are now finding out about this shelter?
So,
Okay,
so we thank you for that question, Elizabeth. I cannot give you a definite answer as to why, but currently the need is for the population that is had at the moment. You know, there's a process, as Stephen said, there's a process. There's an RFP process that happens. And at this point, the provider is has had a relationship with the owner or the landlord, and now we have a relationship with the provider. So I can't speak to anything else outside of that because that kind of like predates me, but I'm here now to try to give as much support as I can. So any other concerns, any other questions, I am welcoming to take them back to get some more answers for you guys.
Okay, the
Thank
next
you.
speaker.
Lauren? There a Lauren? Yes.
Thank you.
My name's Lorraine Iannello. I live a block or so away at 444 Central Park West. And my question when do those requests for proposals, those RFP, when did that go out? Do you know the year?
No, I do not. No,
Okay.
have that.
And Mr. Mott, thank you for your explanation. Does Health USA provide the social services, or does Health USA hire organizations like well-regarded Goddard Social Services?
We provide all of our own social services.
And if you had letters from community members where your other organizations are based, saying what a great neighbor you would be, it might allay some concerns. I do believe people need a helping hand and need a place to go. And I'm hoping you are as fabulous as you seem to be talking about. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
I just want to please focus on questions that can be answered by the people who are here from Department of Social Services and by HELP, because they are the people who are going to be supervising and carrying it out. And that's what you're going to be living with and being a part of your community. So I think his history and transactions that they can't answer because they weren't a direct part of it. Okay, but I understand the concern. Next.
Hi, my name is Pablo Zavaios. I'm a tenants' rights attorney and a resident of Manhattan Valley for a few years now. I just wanted to say I can't speak to what happened with the prior owner, but I do think that realities are 93,000 people in shelter now in our city. Most of those women and or women with children. The reality is that we do need a women's shelter, and our neighborhood has done a really good job of supporting the various social services both of our needs of our borough and of our city. And I think that the best thing that we can do, obviously, all the other concerns aside, best thing we can do is extend a welcoming hand and open heart and then see what ways that we can support the women's shelter. I do remember the 107th Street controversy. I think it was very improvident of the last administration to remove that shelter, much as we also very much need supportive housing that's going there now, run by Goddard, and much as we need other kinds of shelters as well. My question for you is, will you have a dedicated caseworker for families to apply for city FEPs or FEPs and other vouchers to make sure that they can exit shelter and have fully permanent housing?
Yeah, Aisha, can you?
Hi, my name is Aisha Morgan. Every site that we run, single or family sites, have housing specialists and case managers assigned. Every client that walks in our doors is assigned a case manager and a housing specialist that works with them from the time they walk in the door. So housing is priority. We have very, very good track record of placing our clients in housing and them sticking. So we work really well as a team with all of our housing specialists, case managers, supervisors, directors of social services to ensure that our clients are stabilized first and foremost, and then seeking housing and then placing to permanent housing for stability purposes. So we do a really good job at housing our clients and supporting them through their journeys.
Amazing. Thank you. Next speaker.
Hi, thank you. I'm with 50 West 106, and would anyone like to ask a question on behalf of me? I think that we had a good discussion. So anyone from 50 West? Hi. It's just my building, and we spoke together about.
Yeah, hi, my name is Andre Voss. I'm an architect in the justice field, which is kind of related. I'm very excited that this thing is happening. I love it. I'm seeing a couple of problems. One is the contract holder is not here. Shelley mentioned transparency. If the developer is not here, there's no transparency. We cannot get answers from the people who actually hold the contract. Why is that? Number two, I'm usually on that side, and we drag out these community board meetings until the ink is dry on the contract and nothing can be changed. And then we pretend to listen to the community and nothing changes. So number two, what is in the contract that cannot be changed? And number three, what can still be tweaked and improved? Particularly 135 people is about 2.5 to 3 times the amount of people we should see on 25,000 square feet. That's just best practice data out of our practice in our office. So 1, 2, 3.
Thank you. I appreciate the questions and comments. I will say I can't speak for Liberty One. They are the owner of the building. They don't hold the contract. We hold the contract. So the social service contract comes through us, and then we are the ones who are responsible for the services that are provided and for the care of the people in that building. When it comes to how many people are in the building, that is dictated by the strict rules by OTDA and the city about how many square feet a bed needs to have in a homeless shelter. And so we can argue about whether that's fair, whether that's a reasonable number, whether that's not a reasonable number. But what we do is follow those rules. I would take issue with that. I don't think that these are jails. I don't think that these are jail-like settings. I think these people are treated as human beings.
There is nothing to debate. If you have suggestions, if you put them in writing, we will forward them. Okay, we will try to get you answers if you haven't gotten your answers. We're not having a debate. That wasn't the intention. Does everybody understand that? Okay, I don't want, no, we're not going to discuss jails. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I understand. I totally understand. Okay. But that's not what we're discussing tonight.
I will add, whether it's germane or not, that on a square footage basis, this site could have more people in it. And we negotiated with the city to have more space for the people who are in it.
Okay, next.
I'm Gloria Ann Kirstein, founder of the Duke Ellington Boulevard Neighborhood Association here on West 106 in 1991 when we were fighting the crack epidemic. And we're still here as a functioning emergency room when issues crucial to our community come up, such as this shelter. And one of the things I'd like to address to Mr. Mott and to Ms. Horn is the following. We have distrust in this community right now. We feel as though the genesis of this particular shelter was done behind closed doors, done under a veil of secrecy. And even though we applaud the fact that you connected so well with West 107th Street Block Association, that has not been repeated here on West 106th Street. So the question that I have for both the city and the help service provider is, when can we have our community advisory board created? And can it be, and can we meet next week? Because we do have a disenchantment with what has been going on right now at that site. And the reason for this meeting, thank you, Community Board 7, but the reason for this
meeting is because we're the ones that fought to get the information based on seeing the Icorn Center undergoing this massive renovation. So we're the ones that brought it to the attention, the community board. In turn, they cooperated to have this meeting. This meeting was not engendered by you or the city. So we're the ones that had to come and try to get the information. So we want to turn that around, have you show good faith, and create a community advisory board with healthy representation of the Manhattan Valley residents who will be most affected. And we're happy. We're happy to imitate the success of West 107th Street, who were able to form such good bonds with the women in your shelters. We're happy to do that, but we have a lot of questions unanswered that can be answered if we have discussion. So can we meet next week?
I would have to look at the scheduling, but I will say that we're committed to forming a community advisory board. It's something that works for us at all of the shelters where we do that.
As soon as possible?
As soon as possible, yeah. What I will say is that one thing that we're doing right now is we're still in negotiation with the city on the exact staff lines and budget amounts. And so to the extent that that is something that we really want to dig into, that's not finalized yet. But yeah, we're happy to set up a community advisory board meeting as soon as possible.
Okay, all right.
So I do want to add to Stephen's comment regarding the advisory boards. We do have advisory boards for sites when they open. The only thing is that once the site is open, we normally send out maybe about a month and 30 days after to get individuals or participants to be on the cab. So and I would definitely reach out to Max to get participants. And as we said, we welcome some healthy participant and conversation to help build the community. But that's typically how for the cab are constructed. Yeah.
Actually, before we move on to the next speaker, it's Max. I'd like to just follow up on that. She's right, actually, and both me and the board chair, Beverly Donahue, who some of you know, actually sit on a few cabs for other shelters in our district, and DSS is very good, and most of the providers are very good about that too. There can be a little bit of a leeway in terms of planning them out, but I sit on them and attend them every month with the board chair, and DSS is really good about that.
Next person.
Hi, I'm Nicole Johnson, and I live directly across the street from this new shelter. We did just have a meeting 2 weeks ago where Evelyn from 107 talked about the positive experience that she had, that her block had with a shelter run by you. And so I'm happy to hear that. And I wanted to ask a bit about the physical configuration of the interior of the shelter. What is the space going to be like? Are the private rooms? Are they shared rooms? Are there private bathrooms? Are people going to have safe places to leave their things so they can go to work? You know, just could you talk a little bit about what the quality of life inside of the shelter and the space is going to be like?
Is it on? Oh, I'm sorry. So the space is a congregate setting. So there'll be shared rooms and shared bathrooms, but there'll be space. Everyone is assigned a locker with a lock. And whatever circumstances happen, let's say somebody's hospitalized or some kind of emergency happens, the staff are charged with packing their belongings, tagging it, bagging it in secure areas until they return. So we have no issues with them being safe. The space is going to have 24-hour security. And we have that in all of our sites. So we're not concerned about any safety. Our primary goal is to make sure that our clients feel safe. So that's certain. They'll have cafeteria. Hopefully we'll create a kind of recreation area for them. And myself, I visit all of my sites. I have several. And we try our best to limit the amount of people hanging outside. Like when we do our tours, safety, the clients are outside, we bring them in. We really try to be good neighbors. I'm also gonna make sure that I leave my business card so that if there's any issues, you guys can always call and ask questions.
Yeah, I'll say that this site is an interesting one. There is a recreation space buried in the sub-basement that has a basketball court, which is unusual for sites. We never build that. But since it hasn't, it's a great opportunity for us to run recreational programs in that space. The shelter operates 24 hours a day, as Aisha said, full security tours for that entire time. It's 11 p.m. curfew, and that's the moment at which people have to be in the shelter and sign for their beds. Right, so the social services staff isn't just there 9 to 5. They're there till 10 p.m. because we understand that people go out to their jobs, go out to do the things they do during the day, and sometimes it makes more sense for them to meet with their case managers or their housing specialists in the evening. So I'm sure there are other questions, but that's sort of a sense of how we operate.
Perfect. Thank you. Next speaker.
Hi, thank you. I live across the street from the shelter. I know this is a sensitive topic, so I appreciate everything. I wanted to hear more about the population and two things. Are these folks, are they on a track to be getting permanent housing somewhere else? Is there like a time limit on how long they're going to be in the shelter? In the contract, can the population just flip all of a sudden if somebody decides they want to change the population from women to men or migrant families or something else like that?
Yeah, those are all reasonable questions. I will tell you that the way that the shelter system works is that women present themselves to the shelter system at one of two sites. There's a site in the Bronx that we actually operate, and there's a site in Brooklyn that we operate. So every single adult woman will come through one of those. They're called intake and assessment sites. And that is we're called the front door to the shelter system. Single adult men have a front door that's in Manhattan. Families have a front door that's in the Bronx. But each population goes into the system at one of those access points. So at this shelter, there aren't going to be people who present themselves to this shelter looking for housing here, right? That's a coordinated entry system. At those assessment shelters, a bunch of stuff happens, but basically over the course of between 24 hours and a month, the needs of that population are assessed. And between us as a single adult operators and the city, a decision is made where that person would be most successful. And so there's all different types of shelters across. There are shelters that are targeted at people with substance use disorders. There are shelters that are targeted towards people who have higher levels of mental health needs. And then there are sort of general population shelters, which are thought of as people who don't fit in one of those categories and so fall into the general population shelter. New York City has a right to shelter, which means that there can be no time limit associated with how long you can stay in shelter. So there is no rule at what point these people get kicked out of shelter. They can't get kicked out of shelter. By and large, people exit towards permanent housing, and that's our goal. And one of the things that we do at Help USA is we really focus on making sure that we make those housing placements in a way that those housing placements will stick. I think that we can sort of get very technical about this, but there's a difference between placing someone out in a doubled up or tripled up situation in a substandard apartment, which would count as a housing placement, and making sure you find someone a housing voucher, a place that they can afford, and a place that they can be stable. And so that's what we work on. We work on the latter. We're not interested in those lesser level housing placements because what we have seen and what the city has seen is that those people rotate right back into the system after a few months. So that's not what we do. What we do, and as Aisha said, we have about 13 people on staff at this shelter that do that work. It's 12 and a half people, but you can't really have a half person. So it's 13 people on staff that do the case management, the counseling, and the housing support. And so I hope that answered your questions. The population question is a city question. So I can pass that off to.
So I thank you for your question. Max, I believe we have some of our staff that's online, logging in virtually. Yvonne Ballard, or Ballard, I'm sorry. Yvonne Ballard and Rosie Gosson, if I can remember correctly. Yeah, so yeah, if I can, if I can defer that to Yvonne if she's on. Yeah.
Hi, I'm on. I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
Okay, great. Hi, Yvonne, are you there?
Yeah.
If you can, if you can just repeat the question again.
Hi. The primary question was, is there something in the contract that stipulates that the population will remain women, or is there something in the contract where somebody can make a decision to flip the population into men or migrant families, et cetera?
So I think there's nothing concrete in the contract.
So yeah, I wanted to defer to Yvonne. She's with our DHS, one of my DHS colleagues.
Can you hear me? Are you able to hear me? Hi. Hello. Now I can't hear him. Can you hear me?
Hi, Yvonne. I can hear you, but I can't hear them either.
Okay. Hi, Danny.
Hi.
Hello? I can't hear you if you're talking.
Yeah, neither can I. I'm texting Aisha now.
We can't hear you. Can you hear us? Okay, I'm gonna.
No. They're trying to figure it out. Aisha, I'm texting with Aisha on.
Okay.
They're working on the audio. Yeah, it was working until just now.
Mm-hmm.
Try this. Okay, one more time now.
I can hear you.
No.
Can you hear us?
No, I'm looking. She's not muted either.
No. Marcia, you can let Marcia know.
I hear something.
Can you let Marcia know?
Oh,
Can you hear
here
me?
it is.
Can everyone hear me?
Yep. Yeah, people on home can definitely hear.
Okay.
Try one more time.
Hi, it's Yvonne Ballard.
Can you do anything? Yes, we're going to turn system down.
Can you hear?
Then we're going to turn Zoom up, which is as much as possible.
Hello.
Okay, and try one more time.
Hello, hello,
Yes.
hello.
Yeah,
we can, yeah.
Bring the microphone over
Bring them. Oh.
to amplify the sound.
Hi, good evening. My name is Yvonne Ballard. I'm the Associate Commissioner for, oops. Hi, my name is Yvonne Ballard. I'm the Associate Commissioner for Shelter Operations with DHS. So while there's no strict language in a contract regarding the gender of what the site will be, it is solely based on the shelter needs and what type of shelter is needed at that time, whether it's female or male. As it relates to asylees, currently we have set aside shelters that are set aside just strictly for them. And DHS is not the only one who houses asylee migrants clients.
Okay, thank you. Next speaker.
Siobhan Joan Dolan. Wait, can you give me the?
Will.
You could have the mic.
So, yeah.
The next speaker is Siobhan Joan Dolan.
First, I want to say thank you for having a meeting here in Manhattan Valley tonight and for arranging that. So I'm a retired mental health nurse and I've worked in the shelter system, Bellevue Intake Shelter amongst others. So are you saying, I want to know if you're saying that this is a general population shelter, or are there, we want to know more about the clients who will be there, you know, regarding mental health issues, regarding substance use issues. We want to know these things, and I didn't hear all that much about it. So, and also, you know, to be realistic, even with one mental health assessment, there are things you may miss. It is inevitable that with 138 clients, you know, there used to be 44 in that building. With 138 clients, there are bound to be multiple mental health and substance use issues, and we need to be prepared. The staff needs to be prepared for that. So, and also by the very nature, as Help USA says on the website, that homelessness and mental health go hand in hand. So it is crucial that we have really excellent mental health services going on in the shelter. And I know you mentioned that there's 13 people on staff and the housing specialists, which of course you need. I'm wondering how many mental health professionals that you have on the staff, and what, just two. Okay. Okay, so that's the women or men coming into the shelter. Then I want to know a little bit more about the services going on in the shelter, including stress reduction, because even if you don't have a mental health diagnosis, the stress of being homeless and not having support can lead you over the cliff. So stress reduction services, groups, support groups are really, really important so that people can feel better about themselves and express to the staff so that the staff knows what's going on. They get an inkling so that there can be some prevention before it happens. And the other thing that I want to say is that I moved here in the 1980s, and there are other people in this room who've lived here longer than me. So when I came here, I lived near the Castle Hotel, and I saw the bodies coming out with blankets from head to foot, the homicide victims with irregularity. I saw the drug gangs, the gang guns, a child on 105th Street being caught between the crossfire and being wounded. I saw all this happen. My neighbor downstairs, I lived at 50 West 106th Street. Back then, in the late 80s, he had a bullet hole in his window. There were prostitutes, a line of prostitutes, all this violence going on. And outside my window, there were often people smoking crack. And I had to make a decision. Do I go out and say something? Or could I be in danger if I do that? So I had to assess the situation. Is it going to be a very, vulnerable person, or am I going to get beat up? So I just want to say that the people of Manhattan Valley who lived there for a long time have a lot of feelings about the shelter going in. And we want the shelter's going in. It makes me a little nervous that it's 136 people. So it needs to be run really tightly.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I appreciate everything you said, and I think you're right. What I will say is that the shelter that we ran on 107th was 120 people. And my experience of that shelter was that it didn't bring any of the things that you're talking about to 107th Street. I think one way to understand shelter, particularly shelter for single adult women, is that it's a kind of refuge for people. People who oftentimes have experienced domestic violence, who have lived difficult lives, and who come to us in a moment of crisis in their lives in need of healing. And that's what we provide. To give you a sense of the split up of the social service team, we'll have a director, 2 case managers, supervisors, 6 case managers, and their job is sort of the everyday work in the shelter, right? Making sure people are showing up for the things they're supposed to show up for, making sure people are making appointments, that they're filing independent living plans, that they're working towards housing stability and the things they need. In addition, we have a senior housing specialist and a housing specialist who work exclusively on finding and securing apartments and rental subsidies for people. And then at this site, we'll also have a licensed social worker and a psychiatrist. And so that's the mental health overlay. What I will say is, we appreciate everything you're saying. We run 18 shelters in the city. We run all sorts of shelters that cater to all different types of people. And so to the extent that there are people that have higher level needs, we're equipped to handle that.
Thank you. Next question.
What's the question?
Oh, yeah.
General population.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Yeah, it's a general population shelter with enhanced clinical services. So it's not a mental health shelter, it's a general population shelter.
Thank you. Next speaker.
The next speaker is Louise Johnson.
Hi, my name is Louise Johnson. I live across the street from the shelter, and I, like Siobhan, have lived here since 1981. And I lived through all the epidemic of crack and the prostitution. Am I not, can you hear me now? So, okay, so I'm a longtime resident and I have a lot of PTSD from having lived here. And the neighborhood is very nice now. And I don't understand why you knew about this 2 years ago, but we didn't. Okay, the only reason we know anything about this is because Elizabeth Kellner was like a dog with a bone going after this. And we only found out about it long after it was planned, apparently with no input from us or any possibility of input, according to what you told the architect over there. That is already decided. So some people knew, but the people who lived in the neighborhood did not know, and we are the ones who are going to be impacted. I would love to think that this is going to be a great place, and I would be more than happy to volunteer and help making it a great place, but it needs to be a great place. And 130 people with a staff of 13, does that include everybody? Because that's not a big enough staff.
No.
I mean, I've worked in public schools and we have a much higher ratio of staff to student than that. So
the staff is 54 people.
I mean, it's like, it's hard for me to even come up with one thing. I mean, I looked at the Lander report, which came out this November on fair share. And as far as I can tell, nothing is being followed with fair share. And just to talk about that, one is it looks like the city is using the path of least resistance. So they place these things in neighborhoods where they feel like they won't get, they're low income neighborhoods with low property values, and they don't think they're going to get any political pushback. That's, you know, the community board was supposed to be notified, but they've only been notified because Elizabeth and I and other people in the neighborhood brought it to the community board, not that it came from these. We know that the Liberty One is a notorious landlord, slumlord, and runs about 70% of the shelters, and a lot of them have, I mean, or they did. There was an article in the Times about them. They're one of the worst landlords ever. And, you know, the fair share document, as recently as November 2023, talks about how it should have increased transparency. There's been no transparency. They're not supposed to be using emergency siting. They're supposed to look at the surrounding neighborhood and the positive, negative, and positive effects on the impact on the neighborhood. They're supposed to consider a 400-foot radius of other services that are being provided. And we already have within 200 feet. We have I mean, and this is not to say whether the shelters they're being run well or not. I'm just saying that these facilities already exist. There is the Park West Hotel, which is just around the corner on between 106th and 107th on Central Parkway. There's Coughlin House, which is across the street. There's Veritas, which is up the street and on the other side of the street, all within the 200-foot radius. And within 400 feet, we also have the Young Mothers. We have this building. We have, of course, the nursing home, which is a huge amount. So we have a lot of social services already in this neighborhood. So why was this particular building so interesting to you? I mean, why didn't you pick a neighborhood that didn't have so much? I'm not done. I'm sorry. I'm,
Make sure it's a question that you have to ask them.
I know, I want to know, why did they know about this 2 years ago? And why was this such an interesting building? I mean, this building, all, by the way, is not paying any real estate taxes. It's listed as a nonprofit, and apparently it is not a nonprofit. And it's a big building. It's 2 buildings. These buildings were housing.
I'd like to first repeat the number.
Yeah, it's 54 people.
That's better. Thank you. That sounds better. You know, I just think the density is too high. I mean, that's gonna at least a third, if not double it's at least a third of the population that's already living there. They're supposed to take into consideration if it's a low density neighborhood. They're not supposed to put a high density facility. Because it changes the nature of the neighborhood. If you suddenly have 130 people on a block that only has 60 living on it or 100 living on it, it changes it. It becomes, you know, and those things have not been considered. I don't know, I can't even begin, you know. I think it's just.
Thank you for that. I can speak to only the things that I can speak to, and I can say that the reason that we were interested in the neighborhood is because we ran a very successful shelter in this neighborhood. And when that shelter closed and 120 beds were taken out of the system as a result of that closure, we thought it would be a good thing to continue the legacy of that shelter by running another shelter in the neighborhood.
They weren't any
That's not a shelter anymore that we run.
It's not a shelter at all. It's a second.
No.
It's a building that's stores having permanent housing. Thank you. Next speaker.
The next speaker is Evelyn Lenoy.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I met a few people here. I'm part of the 107th Street Block Association. Okay, I'm part of the 107th Street Block Association. I came to the last meeting and spoke to quite a few members of the DEBNA group. Yes, we did work very well with Help USA, but it didn't start off very smoothly. There was no transparency, which is why I think it's so important that we have these meetings. I don't understand because we did have the advisory board, the CAB meeting prior to the people coming in. We did, so that we had some input. They wanted 120 people in there. We negotiated down to 75. There was 75 people in there because we found that otherwise it would have been, correct me if I'm wrong, was that correct? Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, so it was supposed to be 180. We went down to 120. Sorry, I had the numbers wrong. But because we had that CAB meeting with the community, we were able to put some, you know, some of our concerns up front. Like I still don't have the answer about, okay, women are sharing the rooms. Is it 2 women? Are there 4 women? How many women to a bathroom? You want it to be humane. You want people to be able to live as well as possible. I do appreciate this organization. They do work very well with the community. Once you have an advisory board that you can respond to, it's something as simple as, you know, a tenant who was a problem. We were able to contact the manager in the building right away. And that person was spoken to or relocated or moved out for whatever reason. So we were able to have input, which I appreciated. But I just feel like this advisory board, like Lorianne was saying, needs to be done prior to people coming in. And we have to look at the building. Yes, you all have determined that 138 people could fit in here, but I think the community would feel better knowing that these women are going to be placed someplace where they're not going to want to come, that they're going to want to come home and be functional. Because we had the CAB meeting prior to the placement of people, the population, we had asked for employed or employable women. And that's pretty much what we got, which was very nice. And we worked with the women in the community. All of that was great. The concern about the change of the population, we were in the newspaper about that because we switched from the women to the men, and we did not appreciate the way the women were displaced abruptly. We had no say whatsoever. I understand that there was a need for the male space. But that is a concern because who's to say what population can be changed?
Point out, demonstrated,
yes,
if you recall, to support the keeping the women's shelter. We have 25 more speakers, so we're gonna have to stick strictly to 2 minutes. Okay, we don't, we try to be flexible, but try to get to a question as soon as possible.
The next name is Jamie Urick.
I'll be short. Jamie Urick, a primary care physician, an Upper West Side resident. I support the proposed shelter and look forward to welcoming our new neighbors. That's all.
I think we deserve.
The next speaker is Jean Jaworek.
I'll be brief too. Lived here for a long time. I now live in Washington Heights, but I'm still active in the community. I guess this is also a sort of selfish request, but not really. As you probably realize, there are few rooms like this available to community-based organizations. I had anticipated tonight that we would see some diagrams of the interior of the spaces, and I think you have them there, but they're not being shared with us. But what I'd like to know, and I am not going to be starting a basketball team, cross my hands, hope to die. But I do want to know if there will be space available that community-based organizations like Debna, like some of the other, little community garden groups could use occasionally for meetings. I also strenuously recommend that in addition to the fact that CAB should start before rather than after the place opens, that it meet on site in your facility, not elsewhere.
I can't promise that there is available space in the shelter. That space tends to either be used or be subject to sort of very strict security protocols as to going in and coming out of the shelter. In the permanent supportive housing buildings that we operate, we tend to be able to offer space in those buildings, but in shelters, it's very strict as to who can come and go. And so that limits. I can say that we're not sharing the floor plans just because they're not final. I have sketches here that have cafeterias labeled as office spaces, and so I'm just sort of using them for my own reference. But
Okay, let's have the next two names.
The next two names are Shelley English and Karen Schmidt. So Shelley.
Thank you. And all due respect to Mr. Fine and Mr. Moss, I appreciate what you're doing. I also think that this due respect to people like Mr. Voss and other people here, if you listen closely, if you're really listening closely, you have one of the most involved community groups in the city. And you know that, and that's why we have all the services that are here. I started my career in city government in HRA, working for the commissioner of HRA. And then I went to graduate school to be a psychology, and my first internship was at HELP on Long Island with homeless women and children. And while I was there were mattresses without sheets on them, and I went to the management and they got sheets and they were responsive to everything that I observed. What I'm asking is, can you please listen to what this community is saying? And the questions that have been asked, when you said, ask questions, there are questions that keep being asked that aren't being answered. Can we compile a list of all the questions that have been asked and pass them on to you and get actual answers way before November? And I, please, can I get your word that you will start the community group, the community advocacy group, whatever, I'm sorry, what is the term? The board that you're going to compile, can we have your word that will happen long before the opening? So you have our support and you have all this expertise from people who are teachers, psychologists, psychiatrists, doctors, someone who's an architect who knows how to do these spaces and has done, these people have so much knowledge. Why don't you take advantage of that, and instead of silencing people, let people's voices be heard?
So thank you again for that question and the concern for the advisory board. So with the cab, in my experience, what I've noticed, a lot of the cabs are set up which is 30 days after a site is open. And what happened is, you know, there is no one there, as far as I'm aware. So I can definitely search, and we can circle for participants prior. However, the cabs will not be initiated until the site is open. So as far as I'm aware, I know Max, you can definitely, if you have questions, if you guys do have questions, more questions, please send them to Max, and we can try to get those questions answered for you if we haven't answered them today.
Find me, anyone that wants to find me afterwards. I can distribute some contact information. We can work that way. Just find me after the meeting.
What was the other name?
The next speaker is Karen Schmidt, and then afterwards we have Spencer Harbo.
Hi, thanks to the board and to all my neighbors for being here tonight. I live at 50 West 106th Street, across the street from the site, and I have two quick and one longer questions. One is, will the building be air conditioned so that the people in there will be able to be comfortable and not need to go outside to cool down? The second one, I think Aisha, you said that when you come by on your tours, you ask anyone who's on the street to go in. That made me a little bit nervous because I would hope that that's something that's done regularly and not just when you come by on your tours. So is that something, what is your policy regarding people congregating on the street?
I said that I do that on my tours, but I also said that the security that's there 24 hours, they do rounds inside and outside of the building.
Okay, thank you. Also, you said that gentleman, I can't remember your name now. Yeah, Steve, thank you. You said that there's gonna be 54 staff members. How many staff members on site at any given time? And how many on site 24 hours? So how many are on site during the day and how many 24 hours?
So there are 32 security staff. And so there's 3 tours of security. So it's probably about 10 security on staff at any given time. And then an additional 12 and a half social service staff. And they're there from the morning until 10 p.m. But obviously they don't work 14-hour shifts. So they stagger in and out. Just to give you a sense.
Okay, thank you. Finally, I'd like to talk more about the Community Advisory Board. My neighbors have requested it. One strenuously urged that it get started as soon as possible. I'd like to demand that this Community Advisory Board be formed as soon as possible and begin to meet. You have people here who would join in a minute, so I don't see any reason for waiting at all. So I would really very much like to, as I said, demand that the Community Advisory Board be formed very soon. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I can speak to that. I don't know the official Community Advisory Board stamp that DHS gives to a Community Advisory Board, but we're welcome. We're happy to meet with you guys starting as soon as possible. So if that is just an informal meeting of all of us that turns into a Community Advisory Board once it actually can, that's fine with us. We're happy to get started and started to have those conversations now. And frankly, that serves us, right? Because part of what we want to have conversations with you guys about is how can we work together, right? We're bringing women in here who have needs that the community can support. And it's great for us to be able to go to you, to all the people here who are doctors, who are psychiatrists, who are experts in certain things that our clients might need help with, and make sure that we're working in both directions with each other.
The next 2 questions.
Spencer Harbo and Daniel Coughlin. Spencer?
Hi, I also live across the street at 50 West 106. And I think like a lot of folks in the room was a little alarmed that the building was going from 40-ish residents in the former Icorn building to 130 plus. And so I'm curious, I know you don't determine that number, but if you could dive into how that is determined, how you arrive at that figure. And is that something that is set in stone or could be negotiated with the community advisory board before the building opens? And then echoing Karen, I'm curious about air conditioning in the building and other features to make residents comfortable. Are there places for privacy and respite? If you could talk about any of that, that's relevant to comfort of the residents. Thank you.
Yeah, so the way that we do this, we have a full-time person on staff whose job it is to lay these shelters out. And so what she does is she gets these floor plans. We talk with our partners at the city and with OTDA about the regulations for how much space you might need. And then we typically start negotiating down from the maximum. So our goal is always to have a shelter that has more space in it, that's more livable. This shelter in particular is an interesting one. It's not congregate in the way that you would think of congregate shelters. It's not going to be one giant room with 50 beds in it. That's not what this looks like. These are much smaller dormitories with a few beds in them. And when we have the opportunity to do that, that's the kind of shelter that we like to run. We have a couple of shelters on the single adult male side that are those traditional large congregate shelters. And we find that those are more difficult to run, and those are provide more stress to people who are living in those scenarios. And so what we try to do is create smaller rooms that are cozier. We try to create more bathrooms and more space for people to feel less like they're on display at all times. And so that's the goal here. I can go over some of the specifics of the building and what it looks like, and sort of, if you guys want to come up after, I can show you these draft floor plans. But essentially the way that we like to structure this is there's a basement and a sub-basement. The sub-basement is the recreation space. It's a big basketball court. And then up from that, there are 2 levels of services. And so those services are a cafeteria. There's a full kitchen, a working kitchen on site for helping preparing foods and serving foods in the cafeteria. And then in addition, there's all of our office space. And one of the things that we are fortunate in buildings like this that we're unable to do when we take over hotels or buildings that are basically already designed is that we can set up all of the office spaces that we need to do our work. So this isn't social workers crammed in with case managers crammed in with 15 desks in a room, right? This is much more private space for people to have the conversations that they need to have, to feel supported and to feel like they can really open up to the people who are there to help them. And so that's the goal of the shelter. Again, it's our staff is still working on it. It's not open yet. There are, walls being moved, lights being put in. And so all of that is a work in progress. And to the extent that we start conversations with you guys before it opens, those things are movable. If you guys see something that we missed, we're more than happy to go back to the landlord and say, maybe why don't we move this wall 6 inches? Why don't we think about what this space is really doing? Why don't we think about, even down to what color we're painting the cafeteria? That kind of stuff really matters. And we've been doing this for years, and we think we have a pretty good handle on it. But we're not going to sit here and tell you that we've thought of everything or we know everything. We're learning every day. So we're open to all of that. Yeah, it's yeah, we'll double check, but I can't imagine that it's not. Yeah, I don't have the mechanicals on this floor.
Okay, next question.
From Daniel Kyle.
Daniel, hold on to the mic. See if to streamline the question.
How this shelter is run is going to dictate whether it's something we can take pride in or lament. And I think a lot of us share the concern that tripling the number of beds that were previously in the facility pre-COVID is going to make it more difficult to do. So is there, like point blank, is the city and the nonprofit and the landlord open to negotiating a less drastic increase in the number of beds to make it easier to provide a better environment for these people so that they are less likely to want to leave and congregate outside and all that stuff? And the other question I have is, does the nonprofit have a relationship with the landlord already in other shelters around the city? Because I understand that they have a terrible track record. So I want to know what that relationship is like and how that might play a factor in this shelter here.
Yeah, so I'll answer your first part of your question first and the second part second. I don't have insight into what this building was before or how that facility operated. I can tell you that for us, we are comfortable with this number of beds in this space. We feel that this is workable, a good size, and a manageable space for us. I think when you think about how many people are in a site like this, the floor is sort of how we feel that we can serve people the best in this site. If this were a 30-person site, there would be 100 homeless women somewhere else, right? And so to a certain extent, what you try to do is get to a point where you feel like you're serving everyone as best as you possibly can, but not go below that point, right? If you're going below that point, what you end up doing is displacing people to other places, having to open more shelters. People end up in hotels and places that are not as good for them. With regard to Liberty One, I can say that we run 2 successful sites with them. We haven't found them difficult to work with. I can't speak to any of the other buildings they operate other than the 2 that we operate with them. And they've been successful buildings. We have one in Queens and one in Inwood.
Common cafeteria. It's laundry. There were cafeterias and common rooms. The retreat meeting. So the density of the building, which once had 48 apartments, and apartment was because of this very vulnerable, psychiatrically diagnosed teenage population. So that explains why the previous occupancy so low here. I'm not saying don't negotiate it down. I just want people to know why there was that space.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll talk to them. I don't control what they do, but I'll make that request. Yeah, I'm happy to pass that request on.
Wonderful. Next question.
Next person is M. Phyllis Cunningham. And then afterwards, it's Christian Portella.
I'll hold the mic for you.
Yes, my name is Phyllis Cunningham. I live in the neighborhood. My questions have been answered in terms of what populations are going to be accepted into this. But I have one other question. I'm wondering, and maybe you may not have anything to do with this, but who is responsible for the construction work? Because I have gotten off a bus at the corner on Manhattan Avenue and 106th Street, and things have fallen on my head. And when I moved away, I looked up and there were actually a window casement of a window dangling out the window. And I ran into the building, the area was open, the door was open. I ran into the building and had to really run through a lot of places to get anyone to respond. And of course, right away, they just ushered me out of the building and locked the front and closed the front door. But I'm just wondering, who are the construction workers? Are they unionized? Who's supervising them? I am concerned about that.
I'm so sorry to hear that story. That's terrible. We are, to get a sense of the relationship, we are a prospective tenant. We are not the landlord. We don't own the building. We haven't moved in yet. But we do have their phone number, and I'm happy to call them and explain that more than one member of the community has told us that story and that we're not happy with those things happening. And then, we have as much power as a prospective tenant has, but we're at least another voice.
Thank you. Next question.
Thank you. Christian Portella. And then afterwards is Lisa Greenwald.
I'll hold it. We're doing a question.
It'll be quick. It'll be quick. Just let me hold it.
Just to move this along.
I would never argue.
I'll be quick. My question is about safety for the neighborhood. I'm kind of surprised, to be honest, and be frank, this question hasn't been addressed yet. It has in part a little bit by Siobhan and the gentleman here to my right, but I'm going to be direct. Part of it has been a little bit, calmed, concerned, and that it'll be women as opposed to men. Nevertheless, what I'd like to know is, I guess I see, okay, they're not going to be, it'll be general population, not drug addicted or mental health. But could there be any danger posed to the community from the people that are there? I say this, I was on my way to church one Sunday morning about a year ago. Across the street, the corner of 106, the cafe, before the gentleman put the thing up, it was just an enclosure wall. I'm walking by and I see a homeless man doing something. What's this guy doing? You know what I'm saying? Oh, what's that? The guy was taking his own excrement and putting it there and going back for refills. I'm sorry that disgusts people, but that needs to be said. In LA, I know it's LA, but these things happen here, and the same thing happened, I'm gonna get to it. There was a man who dumped a bucket of his diarrhea on a lady. She was traumatized. She has to go every 3 months to make sure she doesn't have a virus. A homeless man, let us be frank, a vagrant, a guy who probably shouldn't be in the street. Because homeless means you don't have a job, you're down on your luck. People who are on drugs, people who are criminals, there are people who are like that on the streets too. Don't be just calling us homeless. And the fact that you're calling them clients, I'm a professional photographer and videographer. Everyone's professional. A client is somebody who provides a business. Are they paying you guys for something? Just call them what they are. If they're homeless, that's fine. There's nothing bad in that word. So my concern is, would there be any danger, any concern? So I think that's valid, because was the person that here happened, I think, a subway station in Queens, he took a bag of excrement and just shoved it in the lady's face. No, that's another one. Yeah, but nobody's bringing that up.
It's good to bring it up. It's not the population we're talking about.
I know, but I just want to know still, is any concern? Thank you.
First, I would like to say that these are human beings first and foremost. These are people. These are people who happen to not have a place to live. And within that population, there are a range of things that are happening to those people. Some people lost their place to live because they experienced domestic violence. Some people lost their place to live because they had a hospital bill they couldn't pay. Some people lost their jobs. There's a million reasons that people end up at these moments of crisis and end up with us, end up seeking shelter rather than living on the streets, seeking shelter rather than living in a car underneath an overpass. And we're here to help those people. And I think those people are deserving of our help. I will say that my organization employs 1,400 people who work with those people every day. I don't fear for their safety. I think that we run exceptionally safe and well-run shelters. I think that we are good at identifying things that could pose problem to both the community, but also to the people that we have in those shelters every day. When I walk in a shelter, I don't feel any less safe than I do sitting here with you. So I hope that answers your question. Yeah, if I could really quickly, one of the wonderful things about the city that we live in is that there's a right to shelter. And what that means is that for the most part, you wouldn't recognize a homeless person when they walk by you. There are between 70 and 150,000 people who are unhoused in the city right now. Most of them work. They could be your Uber driver, right? They could be sweeping up after you at work. And then they go home and they sleep in a homeless shelter tonight. And they're able to do that because we have a right to shelter and we have these facilities that allow them to do that and to have a place to live while they're working their way out of this crisis that they're in. And so, when people have in their idea of what a homeless person looks like, they're typically thinking of what a mentally ill, unhoused homeless person looks like, someone that they encounter on the street who's dealing with very different things than what most homeless people are doing, right? And so I would ask you all to broaden your scope when you think about people who are unhoused and people who are going through that moment in crisis, to include people who might be caring for your kids at a daycare and happen not to have a place to live.
Next question.
The next person is Lisa Greenwald, and then afterwards it's Lily Perez.
Hi, Lisa.
Don't want to speak?
Okay, thank you. I actually want to address maybe more of a comment to the audience. My name is Lisa Greenwald. I'm a community organizer. I live across the street from the Ellington shelter on 111th Street between Broadway and Riverside. And it's been a pleasure to really organize so many members of our community to help the shelter, which was a women's shelter, then closed and became a family shelter. And I guess all that I want to say to you is it's been an amazing experience. I've met wonderful people. I've also met people who are very complicated and difficult. I'm still busy organizing and working with the shelter. But with all due respect to the people sitting here, what I want to say to you is that the city through its...
Oh.
Sorry, yes, is that better? Oh, okay. The city and their services, DHS, and even the social service agency that they employ will do what they need to do and what they want to do. And things like curfew at 11 p.m., security outside and inside, number of service providers, housing specialists. I was writing all these things down because indeed, all of those things became issues and are still issues at the shelter on 111th Street. So the service providers told our community board many wonderful things about how well they service and how many people will be on site and how they promote security. And then things don't always go that way. So I think it's just really, really important to be aware of that and to continue to advocate and to make sure, because these people sitting here might not be the people that you're dealing with 6 months from now. And it's just important to keep in mind and to just stay vigilant and yeah.
Next question.
Juliana Hess.
Yep. Hi. So read. I want to follow.
On the microphone.
It's on. Just. Oh, okay. Here we go. So thank you and sorry. I want to follow up on what my neighbor talked about. Fair share. This is not about NIMBY. This is about fair share, and I'm going to give lots of numbers. So sorry about that. So let's start at the borough level. As of March 2024, Queens houses the highest percent of the homeless population, 30%. Manhattan is at 18.5%. Staten Island is at a whopping 1.39%. So now going to Manhattan. As of March 2024, the Upper West Side houses 11% of Manhattan's homeless population. East Harlem houses also 11%. Only Midtown and Chelsea house more, but both of these are areas that are not low-density residential areas like the Upper West Side is, and in particular, Manhattan Valley. So now let's talk about comparison. The Upper East Side houses 3.86%. The Financial District houses 3.72%, and Greenwich Village houses 2.03%. So these three combined house less than the Upper West Side. I'm sorry, I don't have numbers for Manhattan Valley specifically, but we have 14 shelters between different types of sheltering facilities between 102nd and 107th. Numbers show concentration of shelters in certain districts that are economically weaker and further economic segregation in our city. So on quality of life, first of all, before that, I want to state that oversaturating a community with shelters has economic impacts on small businesses. And I'll talk about this in a second. So on quality of life, the Regency shelter on 104th and Broadway has had a sidewalk shed for more than 10 years. The photos that my neighbor is going to put up were taken yesterday under the side shed. Trash is all over. Trash bags are left to be torn by the rats. Dead rats are walked over, and pardon me, but vomit sits there for days waiting for the rain to wash it away. There are 3 storefronts under the shed. One store under the shed closed and has never reopened. So here is the ask of City of New York and elected officials. We do ask for a policy of fair share to be implemented in our city so that private capital cannot make the decision where shelters go based on where their profits are going to be the highest. We do ask that please, before you bring another shelter to our welcoming community, we do ask that equal and fair distribution of shelters is achieved across all community districts. Thank you. Just 1 second. Yeah, I do have a printout. I had a partner. I would like to give it to over there. I'm sorry, I don't remember your name.
Yeah, or Ron. Is there somebody that signed up to speak named Ron F. or Rick F?
Perhaps it begins with an R. Thank you. We're looking for, we're having trouble reading the handwriting. Maybe it's a P if it's not an R. All right, we'll circle back at the very end, but we're getting through the list.
Lauren Monchick.
That's me. I have just a quick thing. Pretty much everyone's covered it. I just want to make sure I understand. So people can stay in the shelter all day. They're not to be taken out, right?
Yeah, they can't stay in the dorm rooms all day because we have to clean them, but they can stay in the shelter.
In the common space. And then the other question was, I couldn't quite follow the staff numbers. How many people are there overnight?
Yeah, so 10 to 12.
Okay.
We have 3 tours of security. There's 30 people on security, so that would be 10 security members in each tour. So there's at least 10, and then there would be some overnight people.
Great, that's it.
Next, we have Mark Rauch. Mark? Okay.
I live about a block away, half a block away from the shelter. Most of my questions have been addressed, if not answered, but I have one simple question now. Where will the entrance to the shelter be? Will it be on 106th Street, Manhattan Avenue, or both?
The entrance is on 106th.
Thank you. Next question.
Next is Sarah Subhani.
Hi, my name is Sarah. I'm a resident of Manhattan Valley, and a lot of my questions have been addressed, but specifically one about the population. I know you had mentioned that you had a really successful women's shelter on 107, and I know that the community all agreed with that. They had, built a lot of ties with those women. They were really happy to see them flourishing. I'm just curious what you guys had learned from that lesson where all the women were abruptly displaced, and then it became a men's shelter, and how can we prevent that from happening with this population of women that you're bringing in, where I know it was a lot of effort from the community to try to make them feel included. And I know we want to continue to do that for this population that's coming in, but I just don't want them to just disappear overnight.
What's that? Oh, I have been honest. I hope you don't think that I'm.
Oh, excuse me, we're not gonna have.
No, I will say that we had a great experience working with the women, and that I was going to pass it. The city is in charge of managing its own capacity needs. So I don't know if you want to add to that or not, but.
Yeah, I mean, I believe Yvonne did address that, but as far as I'm aware, it's a general women's population. That's what I'm aware of. I haven't heard anything else.
Thank you. Next question.
All right, so this is our last in-person speaker. We're circling back to that. You spoke.
I spoke on her term, not on mine.
Up to Shelly.
The lady who gave you her stuff. You send it per time. Right, and you got to speak back.
Do you have a specific question you'd like to be answered?
I'm sorry. So here's the thing, I've had, excuse me, excuse me, I don't need a microphone to be heard. My apologies to you. I have sent no questions in advance to the community board. The developer chose not to be here and to help coordinate. Only a small portion of those questions have been answered. I'm an expert in this field, not me to
Eric is here, and I have more questions. So I do have questions. Yeah. Yes, I did. You're not answering them. You have my questions. I don't have your questions. Yes, you do. Questions. And you do. And the developer who's not here. You have the questions? I don't have any questions. I sent them to. I gave you my time. Well, right now, well, the last half hour, you can fight MCB. So I sent them to you before this meeting, your official website app. I mean, it's simple enough to answer a couple of questions, unless you want to just shut us the fuck up. Oh, that's not what we're doing here. So what do you want to do? And answer questions or not? That's inappropriate here. We're going to answer your questions. When they get the questions, glad to. If you have the questions in an email, send it to our office or here, and we'll make sure you get your answers.
Thank you very much. We appreciate that.
All
Max,
right.
any more names?
Yes, so I'm gonna circle back to one other person that's here, and then we do have a couple people on Zoom.
Sure.
One last call for someone whose name might be Rick, or it might start with a P. Maybe you have a middle initial that looks like it. Yeah, here, take a look. And we're so sorry. A couple of us have looked.
No.
Ryan?
Oh, there's a Ryan maybe.
Ryan,
Is
great.
that you?
That's me.
Oh,
Okay.
It's Ralph.
Ralph. Okay, thank you, Ralph. So we're gonna do Ralph, and then we're gonna move to the people on Zoom.
Hi, everybody. I want to thank everyone from both sides who've taken the time to be here. As frustrated as many of us are about the lack of information about how this was set up. I just want to say one thing to you. Be careful about telling us to broaden our outlook, okay? There are a number of people here who've spent their entire lives in public service or in community organizing. I live in 50 West 106th Street. I've lived there for 25 years. It's diagonally across from your facility. And before that, I lived on 109th Street between Manhattan and Columbus for 10 years. Some of us have seen a lot of things in this city. So I have one quick comment, which is, aside from all this other stuff and the judgmental stuff, for most of us, the question is your facility going to make the neighborhood safer or less safe? Right? That's not a question. I'm telling you what one of the core issues is. Right? So my question for you, and I'm going to say thank you to Elizabeth for actually answering my question about the structure of the underlying deed, which is unrestricted, right? How long is your contract? And does your company or does your organization have the right to renew it?
It is a 5-year contract with a 4-year extension. We can be replaced at any time if we're not performing.
Thank you.
Okay, now we're going to move through the people that are on Zoom. May not be able to see them, but you'll be able to hear them like you did with Yvonne earlier.
Yeah, I will announce their name and promote them if they are on the Zoom. So the first person is Andrea Cambara. Okay. Andrea, are you able to unmute yourself? Andrea?
We're not sure if it's on her end or our end. We think it's. Oh, here she is.
Hi, I just submitted something in the Q&A, and I mean, I don't, just that the information we were told that we can submit our questions. So if it would be more meaningful if that specific address and contact information could be shared, and if there could be a portal where people can voice their questions and where answers can be shared. Thank you.
We can come up with that. I'll work with Marcia and we'll figure that out. If it's coming right to us first or however we want to do that.
Right, like clarity about the point of contact and, a working site that's transparent. so that if people are in the community and they have a meaningful question that they can ask it and that it can hopefully get addressed. Thank you.
Thank you. And the last two people who signed up to speak on Zoom are Jeff Tarr and Sophie David, but I do not see either one of them on the Zoom.
Sophie left.
So that is the conclusion of the speaker signups.
Oh.
Thank you. So moving from here on, one, we have a mechanism for further questions. Second, although CABs have a way of being formed, there's been receptivity to have meetings with the community and from the provider, and I think that's wonderful. It's one of the rare times we've heard that, and appreciate the concern of the community for wanting to make it work. And the best way to make it work with the community is to have the community's input, not after the fact, but as it's leading up. Be aware that I'm sure generosity of time has to be done with a concern for doing the work you have to do. But we appreciate your receptivity to doing that and look forward to it. We thank you. I think that a lot of questions were answered tonight. There are certain things that are very difficult to answer because the people who were here weren't involved with them. That's why I brought Laura Jervis, who had some knowledge from the other, and Elizabeth knows a lot also. So we're fortunate in that way. So we have a game plan now. I want to also especially thank Gloria Ann, who put together meeting with the thing. She's been doing this for years, and she's tough, but she is sensible about the way she does things. And her motivation is to make things work and work for the community and work for the woman. So we thank her especially. And Elizabeth just has been on top of everything. There are others too. Gene, it's so good to see you. Okay. We all worked together for 2 years on a community advisory board in the area. The other thing we're going to be looking at this committee, I'll just point out that people may not be aware, but food insecurity is great even in this community. And unfortunately, the funds that are normally going to organizations like Westside Campaign Against Hunger are being cut by 25%, and moving ahead another percentage in addition. So look at our website in the next, about a week from now. We're going to try to have information on how you can contact city, the mayor and all elected officials to make sure that the money is there of all things to be cut. We don't want anything cut, no services, but food. Okay, and Westside Campaign Against Hunger, that started as a small organization on the West Side, now not only takes care of the West Side, but has a storehouse in Washington Heights and helps other agencies all around the city get their food, get fresh produce from New York State, and bargains for lower prices because of the large quantities. So they're doing wonderful work, and we all are to support them. Otherwise, our next meeting of our committee is on the 25th. It's always the fourth Tuesday of the month. But that's not, we welcome you always, but on this issue, we have two approaches that we're going to do. One, bring your questions, and two, we're going to arrange for meetings, not CAB, but meetings that'll involve the community in support of the setup as it goes along. And I want to thank Marsha Horn from DSS, with Stephen and Aisha. Thank you so much for giving up your evening. It's not, they could have said we'll be on Zoom, okay, and sat at home, but came directly with the community, and let's give them a round of applause. Thank you. And we also thank the West Side Federation of Seniors Supportive Housing for giving us this space as they have in the past. I'm the president, but it helps. But the fact is that West Side Federation has always been open to provide space for the community, activities for the community, and it's a treasure here. We have an older adult center that's recognized citywide and beyond. So I want to wish everybody a good night. Okay, thank God it's not raining. It's not too hot. So have a safe trip home. Hopefully not too far. And good to see a number of you. Thank you.